Hi everyone, my name is Russ Denny. I'm a former warrant officer in the British Army. I served for 27 years in the armed forces from the age of 17 to the age of 45. And I think what I'd like to do today is start with busting the myth that somehow Scots soldiers wouldn't be allowed or are prohibited from voting, whether that be in referenda or in elections in general. And the reason I do this is because I've seen in mainstream media the shock stories of troops being denied their voting rights, of not being allowed to vote in elections that are important to them. And I've seen it in things like the Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Times, and the Telegraph. And the reason this upsets me kind of so much is because for the last 5 years of my career, I was the appointed unit electoral registration officer. So I know how ludicrous this assertion is. And it was even parroted I believe, in the Guardian by such esteemed people as Tom Tugendhat, the current Tory MP. And the truth is that everyone in the British forces is entitled to register to vote. Even if you're Scottish and you're stationed outside of Scotland, you can register at your address in Scotland, or you can register an address you used to live in Scotland. There's absolutely no difference at all. That applies to serving soldiers. It applies to their family members as well. So if you're the spouse of a soldier or the child of a soldier, you can also register to vote as a service voter. All you have to do is go online to, have a Google for Armed Forces Register to Vote, fill in the details, and it's as simple as that. Each registration is valid for 5 years. Will allow you to vote in any election in those 5 years. Obviously, if you move house, re-register, and after that 5 years, you just register again. So can Scots soldiers vote in elections in Scotland? Of course they can. They always could, and they will continue to do so.
Hi folks, Cliff Purvis here. Welcome to the show. Just a little bit about myself. I am an ex-British Army full corporal. I spent 14 years in the Queen's Own Highlanders and 10 years in the Royal Army Medical Corps. One of the myths I'd like to have a wee chat about today is this myth about the undying or unexpired loyalty just because we have taken an oath on joining the army that in some way that does not expire. It's of course complete rubbish. We sign a contract for whatever length of time we sign up for. We do our time, we hand in our ID card, and we crack on with the rest of our life. The detractors of Scottish independence, and especially with veterans supporting independence, are very quick to say that we are being disloyal to our oath, without, of course, mentioning the fact that Westminster in no way, shape or form honours its commitment with the Forces Covenant. So no, being a veteran does not exclude you from having a vote. It does not exclude you from voting who you choose to vote for, making an educated decision on that one. And if by the end of the day you have decided that you want to vote for Scottish independence, then that does not mean you're being disloyal. Thank you.
My name's Colin Milne. I served in the Royal Navy from 1972 to 1996. I was a seaman officer in the Navy. I drove ships, commanded a couple of Nine World War vessels, second in command of a frigate, but I also flew helicopters. I flew the Sea King from Prestwick, in fact, flew the Wasp from the back of a frigate, and was involved in the aftermath of the Falklands campaign. I flew the Lynx from the back of a frigate and destroyer, and I was involved in patrolling the Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War, including the tanker war, escorting convoys through the Straits of Hormuz. The myth Scotland couldn't defend itself as an independent country. Well, while Scotland's been in the UK, it's always actually contributed more than its fair share of people towards the UK's defence. A little snippet I picked up on a few years ago when I was in Shetland, and it was that at the Battle of Trafalgar, a quarter of all the Royal Navy sailors in that battle came from Orkney and Shetland. I'll say that again. A quarter of all the sailors involved in the Battle of Trafalgar were from Orkney and Shetland. So Scotland's always contributed more than its fair share of personnel on a population basis. And so in terms of getting the number of people involved, that just won't be a problem going forward. Budgetary, well, if we are in NATO and we spend the recommended percentage of our GDP on NATO, that would be the equivalent of £3 billion a year. That's going to buy a lot of bang for your buck. So we'll be able to afford it. Our location is absolutely critical in geopolitical terms in the North Atlantic. So those people who say, oh, you won't be allowed to join NATO, that is rubbish. We cover a very critical area, especially with the new, very high-tech Russian submarines that are coming online now. And the NATO will not be able to afford to have a gap where our bit of the North Atlantic is. So of course we'll be invited to join NATO. And the whole point of mutually defensive alliances is that each contributes according to its means and its situation. Norway has very great amount of national sovereign wealth, and it shares a land border with Russia. So obviously it has very strong defence forces. Scotland will pay according to its means and will undertake roles which are commensurate with where it is situated in the world and what strengths it brings to the table. There's already large amounts of NATO infrastructure in place. There are early warning radar stations, which are part of the NATO's European Early Warning Organization. There are fueling jetties. There are all sorts of, and we have the benefit of having large areas of open airspace where they can do training for training exercises. We've got naval gunnery ranges up at Cape Wrath. So we have unencumbered airspace and sea space, which are essential for training as well. There are niche roles in NATO. There are critical capability gaps in NATO's organization at the moment. And that's the beauty of small countries, is they can concentrate their effort on filling those niche roles within NATO and leave the heavy lifting to the big countries, which have got the financial means to support that part of the organisation. So overall, I'm quite convinced that Scotland would be welcomed with open arms into organisations like NATO. They can't afford to do without us because of our geopolitical situation. We'll have just as much money to spend on our defence as countries like Denmark, which has similar size and geopolitical situation to ourselves. And we'll do our bit and we'll be part of the team.
And another myth I'd like to address today is this myth that somehow in an independent Scotland, all Scots soldiers would be forcibly removed from the ranks of the British Army, or indeed Scots would be barred from serving in the ranks of the British Army. And it's this point I like to point out that currently 6% of the armed forces, about 6,000 people, are non-UK citizens. They are mainly foreign and Commonwealth. They come from places like Ireland, South Africa, Fiji, Kenya, Nepal, and all these different places. So currently, actually, there's 26 different nationalities serve in the ranks of the British Army. And I believe, although I'd have to fact check this, that quite a large proportion of the recruits for the British Army come from Scotland. So while I, of course, would prefer Scots to join the armed forces of an independent Scotland, there is nothing to suggest at the moment that Scots would be barred from serving in the UK forces, or Scots already serving would be forced to leave.
Hi there, Cliff Purvis here from Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. Just continuing along the myth-busting session we're doing here, just a little bit about myself. I spent 24 years in the British Army, 14 years with the Queen's Own Highlanders, and a further 10 years with the Royal Army Medical Corps. Now, some of the stuff that's getting levelled, is particularly on social media, about veterans supporting independence, is that in some way we are dishonouring those that have fallen, those that have paid the ultimate price in defence of their country. Remember, we are a democratic process in motion here in Scotland. Yeah, we are going through the ballot box. We are on the streets. We're trying to convince people that to get Scottish independence, all you have to do is vote. Yeah. So how could supporters of independence be dishonouring the dead who died defending a democratic country? Yeah. We are exercising a democratic right, and in no way are we slighting the memory of those that fallen. My father served from start to finish in World War II, and there's absolutely no way that I would be part of any organisation that was belittling what was going on at that era. So just because you're a veteran and you support independence, you are not in any way forgetting those that have fallen. Thank you.
There's a lot of problems with misconceptions about people being ultra patriotic, ultra nationalist, ultra, British nationalists. And that's just not necessarily the case, especially when it comes to people like myself, my partner, who are disabled veterans. We've kind of seen it all. I enlisted in the US Navy when I was 19. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get money for college. I wanted to get trained in a skill. I wanted to do something that I felt mattered. I wanted to stop working in a movie theater and going to university without having a major in mind. And I wanted to just meet more people, meet people from other walks of life. And I really expanded my horizons in every way. It helped me realize that, when they say girls aren't good at math and things like that, that were really drilled into me as a kid. I learned that I loved math. I became a flight engineer. I really enjoyed talking to people from different walks of life. I moved to the Middle East. My first duty station was Bahrain, and I met people that I never thought, different perspectives that I never even heard of before. One thing I will say, though, is that I think most veterans are highly practical when it comes to who they support and why. So you can't make empty promises. You can't really kid, or you can't really bullshit former service members when it's something that they know about. There's a lot of things that an independent Scotland can offer veterans of the British forces, such as, adequate rehabilitation centers, adequate treatment centers. There's just so many things that they only get south of the border that an independent Scotland can provide. There's also, the whole concept of having a Coast Guard, which really, that if you think about it, if somebody is very uncomfortable with the thought of ever having the possibility of going into armed conflict, Coast Guard would be a wonderful service that people can join, learn a skill, protect the shores, protect the waters. I did a lot of search and rescue missions that were in partnership with the Coast Guard. And there's just so much that can be done. And it really gets to me a little bit when I hear about how military people are automatically seen as not for an independent Scotland. I think that this will take time. I don't think that the mood of a nation can shift overnight, but I do think that in an independent Scotland, we can really start to shape a nation that is, friendly, outward looking, that treasures diplomacy, but also has this pipeline to train people in technical skills in a non-traditional way. And I'd really just, I can't wait to see it.